Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. This is Barry Braster with ETTA, welcoming you to today's webinar entitled Operation Excellence and Cost Savings Through Documentation, or How to Turn Your Service Business into a Profit Center. I'm going to go ahead and start my viewing here. Just to let you know that today it will not just only be me. I have a guest speaker that I will introduce to you in a second. But just to go show how things work today, it will be a 30-minute max webinar. 20 minutes you'll hear mostly me talking, and then we'll leave 5 to 10 minutes or so for any questions that you may have. Also to let you know that what you see on your right hand side is kind of how it works. So the audio will be provided through your PC speakers. You can also call in. You should have received the phone number, and if not, there are buttons in there that you can use. That's the information window there provided by GoToWebinar and how to use that. The webinar will be recorded today. If you request a link, feel free to send that to me, barry.braster@ettaplan.com. And then if you do have any questions, depending on how things go, I'll try to answer them during the webinar, but mostly I will it's very likely that I will actually do that towards the end. So, all right, let's go ahead and get started here. Oh, by the way, in case you do have any questions, on your right-hand side, as this actually arrow is showing you right here, is where you can ask any questions that you may have. So, a little bit about me, Barry Braster. If you have seen or heard me do these webinars before, I've been in tech pubs now for over 15 years, regulatory affairs, quality assurance background. But I've been basically, as the sales director for Tech Doc Services at ETTA, I've been responsible for and helping out the global organizations with their content strategies in order to ensure that documentation is not only created in an efficient way, but also managed and published in an efficient way. And I'll elaborate on that a little bit. And if you need to reach me, here are my contact details, either through email, LinkedIn, or Twitter. And then I have asked Paul from Excel to also join me and maybe say something about that as well, since today's webinar is provided to you by both ETTA as well as the USPI, which is the Dutch Association for Processing Industry. Paul, I will unmute you. Feel free to introduce yourself.
Okay, good afternoon and good morning. My name is Paul van Excel. I'm director of USPI, that is an association for the process industry on asset engineering information management to improve that quality through standardization, with the end goal that we would have more reliable plants, better safety, better performance against environment, and cost reductions. That is a program that runs for a long time, that is international, has a lot to do with ISO groups, of course. Today we talk about one aspect of documentation. We try to look at the whole documentation of a refinery, for instance, or an upstream installation, and there are many angles that you can use to look at that information. We do that. In fact, there are several standards that we do. One very important one is about the handover of information at a very early stage of the plant from the contractor to the plant owner. We may talk about that in another webinar. And of course, today we look at simplified technical English. In fact, we run behind in process industry compared to aerospace. I think they are much further than we are. They also maintain the standard. I think one reason is that the process industry has always been much more fragmented, since we have very many suppliers and contractors and plant owners compared to the aerospace industry. And so we found it very interesting. A year ago we had a presentation by ETTA also in our annual meeting, which we liked, but we did not yet do very much with it in the year after. And this time we did it again, and now we're taking action. And so today is one of that, and we hope that we can follow up with things like workshop and groups and so on to progress this further. Thank you, Barry.
Thank you very much, Paul. I'm going to go ahead and mute you for now, but I'll open up the microphone again towards the end in case there's any questions from the audience. And
yeah, thanks.
Yep. Okay. Thank you. All right, everyone. So I'll continue from here. Very briefly about Ettaplan. 2,500 employees. 450 of us do documentation. So that means that we write, manage, and publish information on a daily basis for a variety of our customers. Global presence mainly in the Nordics, in Europe, but also in the Netherlands, Central Europe, Germany, Poland, and the United States, as well as offshoring and expertise in China. There are some key figures for you here, and we are also a proud member of USPI. Basically, what we help doing is connect engineering with technical documentation, with the embedded systems, which also have a very close link these days now with where the future is going, which is the Internet of Things. And it's kind of our job to connect all three of them so that either companies can ask us to provide capacity, resources, or we help them with tools and methodologies that are universal, like Simplified English, or we basically have some offshoring / outsourcing opportunities there as well. But anyway, I'll skip through that. It's important that we start with some things to consider here. We're in the energy, oil, gas, processing industry, which obviously, as most of you know, is a little bit of a challenging market at the moment. What I want to open with here is that we look for ways to save money. Obviously, cost saving is a big aspect in our day-to-day business, but at the same time, it cannot really undermine our efforts to become a leaner organization, because saving money is one thing, but then the day-to-day activities will continue obviously at the same time, and one cannot so much interrupt with the other. So now where documentation in that regard comes in, it's usually seen as kind of an afterthought, right? So a necessary evil, so to speak. And what we want to bring to your attention today is that actually it should not be. It should not be an afterthought. It should not be a necessary evil. And where there are ways to reduce the cost, documentation can actually help you contribute to operation excellence. And that's something that I want to discuss today. Because the question, of course, then is how to do that, right? Well, yes, we need to accelerate a project's time to market. Documentation has to go out the door the moment the project leaves, either figuratively speaking or not, leaves the factory on time with quality. Documentation needs to be maybe in any language, depending on where your customers are located. They may have in-country language requirements. But at the same time, it needs to be done at the lowest cost and compliant with both contractual and legal requirements. But then we also have to take into consideration the service business, so the aftermarket business, meaning that end users like service engineers, field service engineers, how much time do they need to do a maintenance task? So how much can we use the documentation to ensure that the downtime is minimized, and therefore our profits are maximized? And those are long-term strategies, but there's also some quick wins that we can look at here. And if we briefly look at the service industry, well, this is a quote by Henry Ford, but if we then also look at what has been researched over the last decade or so, then it's actually researched, and one of the findings were that 25 to 50% of the time of a service engineer goes into finding and understanding maintenance tasks. So now, if a maintenance task is 4 to 5 hours and half of that time goes into working, trying to find information on how to do it, then because the documents are bulky or are not easy to understand, then it's kind of capital waste there. So we're not really being a lean organization if we look at it from that angle. So documentation in that regard can play and should play a more important role. Now, if we then look at some business drivers, right, if we want to create excellence in operations through excellence in documentation, then yes, we want to reduce costs. Yes, we want to drive operation excellence. Of course, we want to improve the project performance. streamline, reduce permitting requirements for drilling, reduce risk, operational overhead. Make sure that the project's time to market is decreased. Look at our maintenance service. Look at the reliability. Optimize it. Reduce the downtime. And how do we do that? Well, we need to reduce the complexity. We need to reduce the ambiguity in documentation. While we do that, documentation that is bulky, not easy to understand, can have negative aspects on the global workforce safety. It can have negative aspects on meeting international regulations that have to do with safety, AHNS operation standards as well, even ISO. It can have effects on whether we want to go to emerging markets if they have a translation requirement, because if the documentation is bulky and ambiguous, then your translations are going to be very costly as well. So we can meet the requirements of documentation, keep looking at that as an afterthought, but we can also turn that around and turn that into a competitive advantage by telling our customers, if we provide you with content this particular way, it still meets all the requirements, but it can help reduce the downtime and in essence become a better part of your product. For instance, by optimizing the spare parts business. So we want to address the source when we look at the problem definition, right, with documentation, with content. If we realize that information is becoming more complex and more bulky, which will impact your user experience because a service engineer, for instance, he or she is the one that has to work with that information. If we want to go to new markets, but we also have to realize that our service centers may be, geographically dispersed. If there are mergers and acquisitions, and we realize that the names or the acronyms that we give to components or parts are different because what company A calls something company B, who is now purchased by company A, will call it the exact same part or equipment something completely different. And then you're going to provide your end users with different parts of documentation, and they're talking, they're using different words while they're talking about the same thing. So also taking into perspective that there are native or non-native English authors, engineers who write the documents, and have to create that content for an end user that may also have a different technical language or cultural background. And we have to kind of meet each other in the middle there. How can we make sure that whatever is written by source A is understood by target B? There could be a risk of misunderstandings as a result. There could be product liabilities as a result. So you want to shorten your downtime. You want to meet the translation requirements, but keep the cost of the translation down to a minimum and shorten your response times, etc. So is there a need? Well, let's look at a practical example here. Turn off engines not required. What does that mean? Well, some of you may think one way. Some of you may think it means something else. But if I give you the different meanings of this, so it's a perfect English sentence, right? But if I tell you that turning off the engines not required could mean that you should only turn off the engines that are not required. So let's say you have 4 engines. It could have this meaning. But it could also mean turning off the engines is not required at all. So a simple English sentence like this can have 2 very different meanings, which obviously can lead to liability, safety issues. But if you have to translate that particular sentence number 1 over here, how would you then translate that into any other language, ensuring at the same time that it would have the same meaning? The thing is, the answer to that is you can't. There's proofreaders, but there's not subject matter experts, because they're the ones, and the subject matter experts, of course, are not translators. They cannot necessarily verify whether the translation was correct. So I'll give you another one. So this particular sentence: clean the turret dome chassis, thermal window securing screw threaded holes, and the thermal window 16 securing screws of all previously used seen using solvent. very long sentence. This is completely ununderstandable by the end user. So by breaking up the sentences, by using simple words, by leaving out the nice to know and not so much the stick with the need to know, you can get to information that's easier to understand and use less content. In this case, the content was reduced by 48%. So now, Paul mentioned already earlier, what did other industries do? We must not be the only ones that are dealing with these issues. No, you're not. You're not alone. In the aerospace and defense industries, these are some of the STE users here, Simplified Technical English users here, is they have already dealt with, I mean, the standard like Simplified Technical English, for instance, has been around for over 35 years. But there's other standards for using structure as well. And that's something that we can all use so we don't have to reinvent the wheel. But you can see that banking, financing, medical, energy, technology right here, those are some companies already in there that have already looked at this and already have dealt with it accordingly. So what is it then? Simplified English. If we just look at the text to start with, I'm going to talk about illustrations in a moment as well, but if we just look at text, what is it? Simplified Technical English. Well, it makes technical English easy to understand. Not by you, not by me, but by the global audience, so basically by everyone. How does it do so? By giving you a certain set of writing rules that are basically all aimed at keeping things simple, to be specific, and to be consistent with your terminology so that you're not using different terms with the same meaning or you're not using one term with different meanings. There's a core dictionary that comes with it, but the point is that you add a specific terminology that adhere to your industry / your organization that is standardized. And what do we mean with standardized? We basically mean one word can basically only have one meaning. And it can help reduce content, it can help make things clear, it can help you save translation costs, etc. Now very briefly, we provide a tool that's called HyperSTE. That's basically a quality control checker. That's like it supports different authoring tools like Word. It's also integrated with a lot of content management systems if you are already looking into that. But it basically is, it checks your content. It does so by providing interactive feedback, as you can see right here, but you can also get rich content through reporting. And it will help you comply with standards, writing standards, like Simplified English, but also structure standards like S1000D or even ETTA, in case you are familiar with those as well. If you have your own style guides or terminology management in place, then it can help you basically automate that process so that you comply with all of that. Briefly about illustrations. Why not use photos? Well, photos are printed usually in black and white printers, and all of a sudden where a picture used to say 1,000 words, it no longer does. We need to simplify and we need to structure our illustrations so that it's easier to understand by our end users, and it's therefore also easier to reuse, and it's also easier for engineers, for instance, to give their 3D CAD data away because it no longer includes proprietary information. So, and this is kind of like a production line right here, how when you use simplified illustrations, it also means you have to use less text. And it's easy to understand by everyone, not only for troubleshooting or how to operate or clean or maintain a piece of equipment, but it'd be great also to use this for training purposes, even to create animations out of it. So if we look at a before and after example, on the left here we have some text, on the right we have some photos. I'm not going to ask you to read through everything, but the idea is that by simplifying everything, you can help reduce the content, stick with the need to know, get rid of the nice to know, use simple verbs, use short sentences, stick to one topic per sentence, for instance, in combination with very clear and easy to understand illustrations will make your content be reduced considerably, but you also make your end user much happier because they understand what they're having to do, meaning that the downtime will be reduced, etc. But if you're going to apply structure as well, so we're going to simplify the text, we're going to simplify the illustrations, but if you're going to apply structure as well, and what that means is we're no longer going to be working in Word documents or providing our customers with PDF files. We're going to be able to, thanks to the use of XML and HTML, be able to deliver our content dynamically to our end users so that information becomes interactive, makes it easier to find, easier to retrieve, it's the same thing, and then easier to understand. so that we can, in this day and age where we have more and more mobile devices, we can allow our customers to work with that, turning almost documentation, dare I say it, into a marketing tool. So the issues that are addressed, I mentioned some of them already. You have unsatisfied customers, field service engineers. You provide them with means that they can do their jobs more effectively. You deal with safety risks. You deal with potential equipment or damage, or even worse, persons getting hurt or worse. If you have to translate, well, if the source is going to be bad, you can expect your translations to be cheap. So if you're going to provide them with good quality source, your translations will not only be cheaper, they will be better because the source is easier to understand, so will your translations be. Deal with legal liabilities, deal with your cost of service. Remember that 25 to 50% of the time of a field service engineer, well, that will be considerably reduced. Even actually doing a good job, it will provide you with predictive/preventive maintenance as well. So what you want to do there is as a result, we've done this for quite some years now, we were able to reduce documentation costs in this particular way. 30% in cost savings on translation localization, 40% reduction in word count, which means less to print for cost of goods sold, quality improvements on everything, 30% reduction in product cycle time, which means that your time to market will be reduced because there's less to write. 40% reduction overall documentation costs, and if you have a lot of legacy content, we can help there as well. What we're trying to say is quality and work orders go up, meaning that your cost and lead time should and must go down. Very briefly, technical information framework here is to kind of show you how this would look from an IT perspective. So you have all your source information here on the left-hand side. That has to be managed, that information, so that you can effectively, so you can then publish interactively to mobile devices and make all of these things happening. And at the same time, you want to be able to give a feedback function so that, you know, whenever people write in your paper documents, you know, your user manuals, your service manuals, that actually gets back to the author or the engineer. And then skip through that. The technical information framework here, what I want to show you is that if you add the methodology, like Simplified English, like the use of Simplified Illustrations, you manage everything in a CMS, which is a content management system. You connect everything to legacy data or even external systems like ERPs, etc. You will be able to provide your customer or your customer's customer with the information that they need, making them happier, therefore making it more easier for them to buy from you. We offer free health checks, as we call it. So basically what that means is you can, with the signature of an NDA, of course, you can ask us to check some of your content. So just to see where it is, how, to what extent costs can be saved, how good or how bad are you doing, simply ask us to do so. You can then also receive a free 112-page booklet that we have published. As a matter of fact, we're already on the 3rd edition. I say that, but I think it's currently the 4th edition already, on the use of advanced technology and methodology in order to create clear documentation. Now, I'm now going to open up the question box for any questions that you may have. And while we ask you, or while we actually have you ask those questions, at the same time, I'm going to open up a poll because myself and Paul, I'll unmute you as well now. We were thinking that it might be a good idea to already ask everyone to let us know to what extent, and in the polls, it now will be open, to what extent you think it would be helpful to create a Simplified English work group amongst ourselves, and then we arrange for that to happen. But we can basically, as a community, then get together and see what are the issues, to what extent do we all believe that this is something that we can use each other's experience and expertise on. So, and while that is opening up, and there's quite a few people already responding, thank you for that. There was a question that I'm going to go to is, can our services be used to speed ISO certification and our maintenance of the certification? by Susan. Thank you, Susan. Yes, it can. Of course, the ISO certification is not telling you that you need to have your documentation in simplified English, for instance, but it will tell you that documentation needs to be in order, that you need to have your stuff together. So using something like STE or Simplified Illustrations, for that matter, will absolutely facilitate that process. It will make things easier to find by, for instance, auditors, easier to understand by auditors, and so therefore it will facilitate it. Second question is whether we can connect or interface to partners so there's only one point of access for our users. Yeah, from an IT perspective, that is possible. I'm not necessarily going to go into the details there, but it's depending on the security, because there's the whole cybersecurity thing, and to what extent we are allowed to do that. Theoretically, it's all possible, but of course we have to look at each particular client to what extent. If we, for instance, want to do something like this, like let's say do a global deployment, the IT of an organization, of course, would have to work along there as well, and so there's not really any issues there. And then another question is, and maybe that that, Paul, are there standards organizations in other industries that we can copy or learn from? Like, Paul, do you know if there's anything in the field of processing, oil and gas, or energy that is currently looking at this?
Yes, in a way, almost all the existing consortia for the process industries, they are looking at this, but then at different angles, so not necessarily the STE angle. That's what I said. I think we're a bit behind that, but groups to think about is Mimosa in USA, who look very much at maintenance and operation. Ourselves, USPI, we look at all the documentation aspects, including this one. Bosk Caesar in Norway, I think they're very much driven by the ISO 15926 standard. The ENA group in Japan, ENAA, that's an association of contractors who also look at documentation. So the issue documentation, the quality of that is paramount for everybody. But to actually look at STE as a means to resolve that, I think there we are really a bit behind, if I'm honest.
Yeah, to add to that, Paul, thank you, is that if you go to a website called www.asd-100.org, or you just type in Google ASD ST100 or Simplified Technical English, you'll get to the organization that manages it for the aerospace and defense industry. That's called the STEMG, which is the maintenance group for Simplified Technical English. They will allow you to, you can actually ask them to provide you with a free copy of the ASD ST100 specification. It's a bit heavy. Don't ask them to send you a paper version because it's a few hundred pages in size, but it's available for free, and you can ask them to provide you with a copy so that you can already go through that and learn from it. And there is also the Plain Writing Act in the United States. That's more for the government communicating to the American public. So that's something that you can look to as well. And there's some other style guides like the Global English Style Guide by John Cole that could also be some good reading for everyone. Another example, or sorry, question is, and then we have 1 or 2 more minutes to go before we close the poll also, is if we have any examples on how implementation of STE/Simplified Illustrations helped organizations expand into new markets. Yeah, we actually have quite a few examples there. If I just look at it from an industry point of view, like aerospace and defense companies do it from a safety point of view, right? So does the medical industry. But if you're looking at consumer products, for instance, there is, the phones, for instance, household equipment as another example, is that those types of industries looking at, one, to save costs, but also to expand. So if they would like to, for instance, go to countries that require them to translate their content into, let's say, Hangul, Korean, or Japanese. For them, it would be a good idea to save cost on documentation also by providing because they would have to provide the user manuals in those languages, to look at STE to make their content easier to understand. So basically to provide their end users, their consumers, with more engaging content, which will also facilitate search engine optimization, and helping them, in essence, one, meeting the local in-country language requirements, and then number two, helping to open up emerging markets for them, because they then see that documentation is more a part of a product, which is really no longer for them, or for some industries, no longer about providing paper manuals, but really providing all the content interactively in the form of an app that you can pull up on your smart device. Okay. I think that's it as far as the questions are concerned. We are 1 minute over, so that's good timing. Just to let you know, the poll closed. 63% of you think it's a good idea to arrange for a Simplified English group. So, Paul, that's a good poll that we came up with.
Very good.
There. Yeah.
Wonderful.
Yeah. Yeah, so we will be in touch with you in order to make that happen. We'll probably create something on LinkedIn, but we'll have to discuss that internally. So in case you have any questions, this is the information for my colleague in the US, for North America, as well as myself here in Europe. And in case you would like to get in touch with Paul van Exel, feel free to email me and I'll provide you his contact details, or you can simply go to uspi.nl. Right, Paul?
Yeah, correct.
Yeah. Very good. Okay, that leaves me to thank you, everyone. In case you would like to receive the slides in the PowerPoint presentation, or in case you would like to look back at this webinar, please also email me, barry.braster@ettaplan.com. I'll provide you with the link details so you can review it and share it with your colleagues at a later time. Thank you very much for now, and we will be in touch with another webinar coming your way shortly. Thank you. Bye-bye.